Here's a three-step process for having more spiritual conversations that my seminary professor joked could save you $36,000 and several years by eliminating the need for a counseling degree. You want to walk conversations through three steps: the external, the internal, and the eternal. Let's first talk about external. Talking about external things is the place where most of our conversations begin and, unfortunately, is usually as far as they go. We talk about what's going on in life, how the kids are doing, how work is going, what the weather's been like, interesting anecdotes from the previous week. The joys of life and stress and difficulties, uncertainties, funny stories, these are the things that most of our conversations consist of, and these are important things to discuss, and it's good to discuss them. But if we only ever talk about the external circumstances of life, we'll never have deeper conversations. Instead, we want to move from talking about the external to discussing the internal. What do we mean by the internal? Well, imagine hearing from someone who's just lost their job, hearing about what took place, what their plans are next, letting them know that, after the rain comes the rainbow. All of this remains in the realm of external circumstances. But when we ask questions that examine what's going on internally, we have gone to a deeper level. For instance, think of talking to someone who's just shared how often they're on the road for work. A purely external conversation could be talking about the aspects of airplanes and hotels and conferences. But an internal conversation might ask them if that busy lifestyle can get lonely. This is a question about their internal mindset. Or imagine talking to someone who has just sent their youngest kid off to college. You could speak only of the extra room in the house or the free time that they'll now have or what their kid will be studying. Or you could ask, do you feel a sense of accomplishment now that they're out on their own? Questions like these can help steer the conversation towards examining how the external circumstances of life have impacted the person you're talking to on the inside, their thoughts, their emotions, and their attitudes. It's one thing to hear about someone's exciting new job and ask about details regarding their role, responsibility, or start date. But to ask them, is that something you wanted to be when you were little? Is to try and go deeper to discuss matters of the heart. Discuss the external realities of everyday life. Ask questions about how those things impact the person's thoughts and feelings internally. And from there, you can go one level deeper still, the eternal. Let's look at the eternal. As your conversation continues, find ways to transition from the external to the internal to the eternal. Questions such as, what do you think God may be up to through this? Or, what have you been most thankful for during this time? Or, do you feel you're having to rely on your faith more? By asking questions aimed at exploring the external aspects of how God shapes us through our circumstances helps us consider issues of eternal significance. After all, to paraphrase A.W. Tozer, everything that happens to us is to make us more Christ-like. Even if you're talking to an unbeliever, you could enter into discussions of the eternal, asking, well, let's say God did exist. What do you think he could be up to through this circumstance? Can yield surprisingly deep conversations. So, a good spiritual conversation ultimately arrives at things of eternal importance. Not every conversation that you have ends up there, but we should have as our goal to contribute what we can to have deeper, more significant conversations with those we interact with. Now, that being said, keep in mind that there is a reason for there being 3 steps involved. It can be rather off-putting for someone to jump directly over the external and internal and land immediately on the eternal at the outset of every conversation. We don't want to force conversations, nor do we want to linger back out of fear that things may get uncomfortable as we seek to create opportunities to speak of the things of God. Move as the Spirit directs you, and this 3-step process of moving from external to internal to eternal can be a help in having natural spiritual conversations more often. So there you have it, a 3-step process for having more spiritual conversations. Go from external to internal to eternal. I hope you found that helpful and that you can use this 3-step process to have more spiritual conversations with others more often. For more resources, check out reasonabletheology.org.